Have you ever been really angry? When anger is so strong that others ignore you. I experienced the strongest feeling of anger in my life when I found out that my wife was cheating on me. And the most terrible thing is that it was only at the very last moment that I realized that I was living with a real monster. I recognized it was time to wrap up everything and leave the master control booth before anyone showed up to shut me down. If I moved quickly, I could deactivate the live assist mode and return the system to fully automated broadcast mode. Our local TV viewers had seen sufficient for the night. Once I had the system operating normally again, I could leave and grab a drink. I craved a drink. I was also aware that there would be consequences to face. Consequences at home and consequences when the general manager and the FCC pieced everything together and came after me. But I was already resigned to my fate, so it didn't concern me anymore. Like I said, I needed a drink. I headed to Frankie's on Roswell Road, a popular local sports bar, and ordered a beer. As I sat there, I caught the tail end of the Monday night football game, enjoying several more beers. The bar was lively, and I could sense the excitement in the air. Though I couldn't catch every conversation, I knew my presence had sparked some interest. Luckily, I wasn't drawn into any discussions, content to sip my drink alone while witnessing the Saints dominate the Falcons. By 10:30 p.m., I was feeling pretty good despite our team's loss. New Orleans 23, Atlanta 3. It seemed the Saints were particularly motivated, possibly because it was their first game back in their stadium since the hurricane. They certainly gave the Falcons a rough time. Our station broadcasted the game alongside ESPN because we were involved in it. I inquired with the bartender about leaving my car in the parking lot overnight. He agreed it was a prudent decision considering my state. He arranged for a cab since I resided nearby in a pleasant residential area of Sandy Springs. Well, that pretty much wraps up the story, and I guess I should rewind to the beginning to give you a clear picture of how I ended up here. I go by the name Richard Head, though my pals call me Rick. I work as a broadcast engineer at WBDK, a local CBS affiliate based in Atlanta, Georgia. With a graduate degree from MIT in electrical engineering and computer science, supplemented by another degree in broadcast technologies, I'm certainly well equipped for my role. Over the past 22 years, I've navigated through various challenging positions within the industry. My journey has taken me through several television stations along the East Coast before settling here in Atlanta, where I've spent the last 5 years. If you'd like a description of me, I'm 46 years old with dark hair that's starting to gray at the temples. I've never felt compelled to get rid of that gray, but I do have a small mustache, and yes, I do use a bit of dye on it to cover the hints of gray. I stand at 6'3" and weigh around 190 lbs, although I haven't stepped on a scale in a while. I consider myself moderately attractive, though I'm not in the league of Mel Gibson or Richard Gere. You may have noticed I didn't mention any younger actors. That's because I'm not familiar with many of their names, and also because I'm not in their age bracket, which would be misleading. Anyway, I'd say I'm good-looking, but not quite in the Dr. Dreamy category. My spouse Sharon and I have been married for 22 years. We have 2 daughters, Melanie and Stephanie. Both daughters have left the nest, with Melanie being married and Stephanie currently a senior in college. Sharon stands at around 5'5" tall and weighs not a pound, over 135 lbs. She has long blonde hair flowing down to her shoulders. Sharon possesses striking beauty, with a figure that catches attention and leaves people impressed. Moreover, she exudes a sweetness that endears her to everyone she meets. She works as a secretary for our pastor, Rev. Bob Shelter, a role she's held for the past 18 months. But I digress. Let's get back to the story. It all started last Friday. I had some free time for lunch, and I decided to surprise Sharon and invite her out. Because of the rain, I parked at the side entrance to the church office for convenience. Upon arrival, I found her office empty, but decided to stop by anyway. Standing there, I overheard Sharon talking to Pastor Bob in his office. "I'm so excited about the upcoming Monday night, dear. It's great that Rick is covering Monday night football matches for the radio station. This means that we will have plenty of opportunities to meet. Have you already booked a room at the La Quinta Inn?" she asked. "Yes, everything is settled. I ordered a jacuzzi again. I can't wait for us to be there again. It's been too long. Come closer, dear." I caught a faint sound of fabric rustling, followed by the sounds of my wife cheating. At that moment, I was completely stunned. It seemed to me that a feather could knock me down. My shock was overwhelming. I felt sick while anger boiled inside me. I realized that I needed to leave before I did something stupid. The thought of having to listen to this one more time was unbearable. I had the urge to burst in and confront them right then and there. Perhaps I should have followed through, but given my state of mind at the time, I was certain I would have harmed them both. Considering the consequences that would follow, I made the difficult decision to walk away. It was the toughest choice I've ever made. Though I wanted to act on my anger, I resisted the urge and left the scene. I was confident that neither of them noticed my presence. They had surveillance cameras at the main entrances, but I entered and exited through a side door undetected. Feeling shaken, I realized I wouldn't be of any use for the remainder of the day. I called the station to inform them that I wasn't feeling well and would be heading home. I needed time to contemplate my next steps, and home seemed like the best place for that. Sharon wouldn't be back until after 4 p.m., so I had ample time to collect my thoughts. It became evident that she was involved in a romantic relationship with Pastor Bob. That was enough for me to no longer consider him my pastor. From then on, I mentally dubbed him Jerk Bob, a play on words with Pastor Bob that I found fitting. My priority was to uncover the extent of their relationship, its duration, and the reasons behind it. While some may find such details irrelevant, I wasn't one of them. I had a burning desire to understand why my marriage had been affected this way. The marriage I believed to be blissful evidently didn't hold the same significance for Sharon. She wasn't the person I thought she was. I was determined to uncover every detail and confront the situation head-on. I refused to be passive, and both of them would face the consequences of their actions. After arriving home, I brewed a pot of coffee and headed out to the patio for some contemplation. The weather was pleasant, and I believed the fresh air would aid in clearing my mind as I pondered the situation. I was determined to sort everything out in due time and needed to calm myself. I can't deny that I shed a few tears that afternoon. It pained me to consider that she would engage in relations with another man, or men, despite promising herself to me on our wedding day. While some might not view that vow as significant, I certainly did. And I had believed she did too. Experiencing something like that forces you to reevaluate your entire belief system and question whether you've been naive all along to believe in concepts like loyalty and love. Regardless of what others may argue, the most devastating aspect of having a partner who cheats isn't merely the physical act of infidelity. It's the shattering of trust, the realization that you can no longer rely on them or have faith in anything they say or do. Throughout your marriage, you believed they were your support, only to discover they aren't, leaving you exposed and afraid. Yes, I might stand at 6'3" and weigh 190 lbs, but I felt defenseless and scared. This underscores the profound impact a cheating spouse can have, cutting you down emotionally like nothing else could. As I sat there grappling with my emotions, attempting to maintain composure and objectivity so I could process everything, I realized that there were issues I had previously questioned but brushed aside due to my trust in Sharon. They were minor concerns at the time, but now they had accumulated into a heavy weight in the pit of my stomach as I connected the dots. How could I have been so naive? Trust, that's what it boils down to. I had placed my trust in her. Today that trust was shattered, and all those subtle hints coalesced into a burden that would be difficult to bear. Facts. That's what I craved. I needed to understand why. I wanted to know the duration and frequency. I needed details on where and who else. My trust had evaporated. I was determined to uncover the answers I sought. I acknowledged that my marriage was built on deceit, and I would confront that reality too, but first I needed clarity. I felt hesitant about facing Sharon just yet without revealing my intentions, so at 3 p.m., I decided to leave the house to avoid being there when she returned. I drove into town and made a stop at the station to pick up some necessities for the next few days. After that, I briefly popped into my boss's office to ask if he had a moment. I explained to him that I was dealing with some personal issues and wasn't feeling my best, so I would need a couple of days off early in the week to address them. He seemed understanding, so I left and headed to Frankie's to pass the time until I had to return home. At 17, I called Sharon to tell her that I was taking a break and would not be home for dinner. She was annoyed and remarked, "Well, it's your loss, because I'm really in a good mood today, and I was ready for intimacy. But if you're late, forget about it." She said it like I needed it. Everything was ruined a long time ago by Jerk Bob. I replied, "Honey, my plans have already been completed, so just keep your mind up for the night, and I'll fix it when I get back." I knew it would provoke her. She objected, "Don't count on it. If you think you can treat me like this, then you won't be lucky for a while." I thought that was exactly what I wanted. I had no intention of getting into bed with her again until I had fully figured out the situation, and maybe I would never do it again. When I got home around 10:30 p.m., I was pretty drunk, although not so drunk that I noticed that the bedroom door was locked. I grinned at the sight and knocked on the door, assuming she was awake despite my doubts. Screaming, I exclaimed, "Fine. If this is the game you want to play, I'd rather freeze than satisfy your desires. Suffer in silence." With that, I headed for the guest bedroom, knowing full well that she would be furious. It would give me a break from having to justify my reluctance to go to bed with her for quite a long time. The following morning, as I rose from bed, she sat at the kitchen table sipping her coffee as I entered the room. I sensed a palpable drop in the warmth of her coffee as I walked in, and the atmosphere in the kitchen turned icy. Her gaze bore into me with an unmistakable chill. Had I not already known of her infidelity, her glare alone would have sent shivers down my spine. I offered a smile and casually remarked, "No need to trouble yourself with breakfast, dear. I'll grab something on my way to the golf course." With that, I exited through the kitchen door, loaded my golf clubs into the car, and drove off, leaving her behind. Moments later, my phone rang, displaying her name on the screen, but I chose not to answer. Soon after, a notification indicated she had left a message. Curiosity piqued. I listened, only to discover the depth of her anger. "You scoundrel, how dare you betray me like that? Come back here immediately." Jerk Rick? No, it was Jerk Bob, not me. If anyone deserved that title, it was him, not me. I never planned on going golfing, but it gave me some time to handle things. I headed straight to my ex-church. You don't think I'd willingly listen to Jerk Bob preach again, do you? It was still early when I arrived, so I figured there wouldn't be many people around, and I was correct. I entered the building. Since my wife worked there, we had a key to the church, and headed straight to the offices. My aim was to install remote micro cameras and mini microphones in her office and in Jerk Bob's office. It didn't take me long to complete the task, and I concealed the transmitter behind some old hymnals in the supply closet across the hall. I had the receiver in my trunk and connected it to my car's electrical system. Now I could monitor their conversations and activities whenever they were in their offices. I doubted they would do much at the church, but I was certain I'd gather valuable information by observing them for a few days and listening to their conversations. When I was confident that everything would function correctly, I searched through her desk, but found nothing. However, there was a prominent asterisk marked on her calendar for Monday, aligning perfectly with what I had heard on Friday. I would be prepared. Next, I ventured into Jerk Bob's office and conducted a thorough search. Despite little success in finding any incriminating evidence, a sudden burst of inspiration struck me at the 11th hour. Naturally, inspiration found me in a church. Where else would it? I meticulously combed through the filing cabinets, specifically seeking receipts for church expenses. As expected, I stumbled upon a file containing several receipts from the La Quinta Inn in Roswell. Some dated back to the end of 2005, while others were from the spring of 2006. Aware that my time was limited, I swiftly made copies of the receipts to take with me, restored everything to its original order, and made my exit. I drove to the golf course and parked in my usual spot. Then I entered the clubhouse and headed to the bar, where I recognized several familiar faces. I wanted them to remember my presence. I sat down at a table in the back of the room and sipped Sprite for a couple of hours. During this time, I have carefully studied the accounts. I noticed that 2 invoices for the end of 2005 were issued on Mondays, and 2 invoices for the spring of 2006. coincided with the dates when I attended a conference at CBS headquarters in New York. What angered me the most was that jerk Bob had the audacity to write off these rooms in favor of the church, calling them conference rooms for meetings. While he was staying with my wife at the motel, I was unknowingly paying the bills. Despite our contribution to the church, I wasn't going to donate anymore. Now they were in trouble. I just needed a bit more evidence, and then the hammer would come down. I was aware this had been ongoing for nearly a year, if not longer. It aligned with some clues I'd considered before. My suspicion is that Jerk Bob has been involved with her since before she started working for him. She had a decent job at Telfor Corporation as a receptionist, but she eagerly accepted the opportunity to work for the church, saying, "Darling, it's so close to home, and I'll be working for the church. What could be better? Plus, the pay is nearly the same as at Telfor. How could I say no? Sure, it's closer to home, working for the church, and almost the same pay, but clearly she was most interested in the additional perks." Clearly, my frustration was escalating with each passing moment. I couldn't fathom the extent of my foolishness. The realization not only fueled my anger but also filled me with disgust, knowing that the woman I had cherished throughout my marriage could betray me without a hint of remorse. Damn it, they were going to pay. Realizing it was time to investigate, I headed to my car and connected my iPod to the receiver hidden in the trunk. After sifting through some data, I spotted Jerk Bob entering his office. He reached for his phone and dialed a number. I thought, darn, I should have bugged his phone, but I didn't. Oh well, I'll just have to settle for listening to a one-sided conversation for now. "Yes, Sharon, I'm at the church. I came here right after you called me. Why don't you tell me what's bothering you?" Pause. Oh, has he ever behaved like that before? Pause. I see. What do you think triggered his reaction? Pause. You don't think he suspects anything, do you, Sharon? Pause. Laughing. All right. Well, you can get back at him on Monday night. After ending the call, he remained seated, deep in thought. I was on the verge of disconnecting when he murmured something barely audible, but I caught it nonetheless. I ensured to save that soundbite for future leverage. Once I log it off, I headed home. Anticipating a slight chill, I immediately began mowing the lawn and tending to tasks in the basement upon arrival. Her response was minimal as I entered, yet it was evident that tension still lingered. When I disregarded her during dinner, she simply sat and glared at me. Eventually, unable to bear it any longer, she attempted to initiate a conversation. "Rick, what's been going on with you lately? Why have you been behaving like this? Sharon, you're the one who locked me out of our bedroom last night, so now you have to deal with the consequences. I rarely go out with the guys, and the one time I did, you exploded at me and threatened me. This is your fault, not mine. Leave me alone," she spat. "I hate you." I met her gaze squarely and replied, "Is that an appropriate way for a devout Christian woman to speak? Your actions hardly reflect those of someone who claims to have a strong faith." Oh my goodness, the expression on her face was unforgettable. She wore such a heavy cloak of guilt that anyone could have seen she was being unfaithful. How she expected me not to notice, I can't fathom. I'll give her credit, though. She managed to compose herself and excuse herself from the table. But in my mind, I knew her composure wouldn't last once I confronted her. Later, she entered the family room while I was watching television. Between you and me, I was tuned to Fox, trying to get a balanced perspective. Her eyes seemed a bit puffy, suggesting she might have shed some tears. The rest of the evening passed without any events. When I decided to go to bed, I simply walked down the hallway to the spare bedroom and went to sleep. A few minutes later, she entered the room and stood there. "What do you need?" I inquired. "Aren't you coming to bed with me?" she asked. "No. You made it clear that there would be no intimacy in the near future, so I might as well sleep alone here and get a good night's rest," I replied. With that, she left the room in tears. Honestly, I wasn't bothered. On Sunday morning, she woke me up at 8 a.m. She was dressed for church and asked if I would join her. I declined, saying twice, "No, I'm not going today. You go and be a good churchgoer, and I'll stay here and enjoy the day." Once again, that familiar expression crossed her face. I sensed she was beginning to grasp the situation, but she swiftly regained her composure. However, as she turned to leave the room, I detected a hint of moisture in her eyes. Later, I heard the sound of her departure, the engine starting and fading into the distance. Subsequently, she sought to converse, but I rebuffed her, preferring solitude. Thus, we both retired to our separate rooms, concluding the day. Come Monday morning, I left the house without encountering her or engaging in conversation. As I departed, my phone rang, and upon answering, she tearfully uttered, "Rick, I'm deeply sorry. I love you, and I despise the current situation." "We'll discuss everything when I return tonight," I replied before ending the call. I phoned my boss and informed him that I would still be taking the day off, but assured him that I would fulfill my commitment to handle the Monday night football game as planned. He expressed satisfaction with my availability for that. Additionally, he inquired about how things were progressing, to which I replied that they were proceeding as expected. My next destination was the La Quinta Inn in Roswell. Upon entering the lobby, I observed a young man stationed behind the check-in desk. Approaching him, I noted his name tag identifying him as Kevin. I politely requested a favor from him, although he seemed somewhat hesitant. He inquired about the nature of my request. I divulged the truth to him, stating, "Kevin, I'm convinced that my wife is having an affair with another man. She'll be meeting him here tonight, and I aim to catch them in the act. That's why I need access to that room." He responded, "I can't allow you to enter while they're inside. It could spell trouble for me. I understand the risk, but all I really want is to place a microphone inside to record their conversation. If you agree, I'll even throw in a couple of tickets to the next Falcons game for you." The audacious fellow had the gall to counter, "Make it 4. I didn't mind since I had 4 tickets from the station to spare. I accepted, and he handed over the key to the only whirlpool suite in the motel. Little did he know I wasn't just planning to install a couple of mini microphones. I also intended to set up micro cameras, much like the ones I had at the church offices. Additionally, I bugged the phone so I could listen in on both ends of any conversation. After ensuring that everything was properly set up, I conducted tests to ensure good transmission and clear views of both the whirlpool and the bed. I anticipated spectacular images if the setup was correct, providing all the evidence I required. Confirming their relative invisibility, I left the room. Before departing, I stopped at the desk to return the key to Kevin and handed him the tickets I had promised for next week's game. "Thanks, Kevin. I hope everything goes smoothly. Enjoy the game." With ample time on my hands, I attended to several necessary tasks. I visited the bank and obtained cashier's checks for half of the funds in our checking and savings accounts. I proceeded to cancel our joint credit cards and arranged to meet with my broker shortly after lunch. Discussing adjustments to our investment accounts, he assured me that everything would be prepared by the time of our meeting. Next, I contacted my attorney to arrange legal assistance for a divorce and related matters. After scheduling an appointment for later that afternoon, I drove to Planters National Bank in Marietta, GA. There, I opened new accounts solely in my name and deposited the cashier's checks. I headed to Marietta for lunch, although I wasn't particularly hungry. Afterward, I drove to my broker's office to go over the documents he had prepared for me. Essentially, these papers divided our investment portfolio into 2 equal parts without needing to sell any assets, thus avoiding unwanted tax implications. All I needed to do was sign my name, and Sharon would need to sign hers. I took the papers with me. Later, I met with my attorney to review the divorce papers he had drafted. I agreed to pursue a no-fault divorce and split everything evenly if she agreed to sign them immediately. However, if she hesitated, I had him include a provision for filing on grounds of adultery. I was confident she would sign right away. With everything sorted, all that remained was grabbing dinner and then heading to the station to oversee the Monday night football broadcast. After leaving his office, I switched my cell phone back on and found a couple of messages from Sharon. One read, "Rick, I'm really worried about you. Can we please talk when you get back before the game?" Another message followed. "I love you so much, but your recent behavior is really hurting me. Please call me." Despite knowing her plans for the night and her awareness of mine, she still chose to express her concerns. I couldn't help but think, I must be the biggest fool in the world to have loved and trusted her. I had made a decision. The only way to salvage our marriage was if she didn't show up at the motel tonight. Her absence would demonstrate that she cared enough about us to try and fix things, to acknowledge the trouble our marriage was in and take steps to address it. At 8:00 p.m., I activated the system's fully automated broadcast mode, and Monday Night Football commenced. Following that, I configured the system to monitor my feed from the motel room. Exactly at 8:15, Jerk Bob entered the room and placed a call. "Hey, babe, I'm in the room. Hurry over here as fast as you can." "All right, darling. I'll be there in a few minutes, right?" she responded. He muttered a few more words after hanging up, which I caught, though I'd have to listen later to discern exactly what was said. Well, there goes my merry egg, I mused, but truthfully, I didn't anticipate that she would end it anyway. It did sting, however, and strengthened my determination to make them pay. I looked through my contact list and started dialing. It took almost 30 minutes to get in touch with everyone, but I managed to complete the task. Sharon had already arrived at the motel, so I went back to watching video and audio streams. "Oh, Bobby, the thought of you and me here alone is driving me crazy. I cherish these nights that we spend together," she confessed. "Come here, you naughty thing," he replied. "I'm going to have fun tonight like I've never had before. I intend to enjoy every moment." "I love it when you speak so boldly, Bobby. I want to be yours," she said. I wanted to sink through the ground. There were the pastor and the church secretary, my dear loving wife, engaging in things I couldn't believe. In those moments and the ensuing minutes, I discovered just how sickening they could be. They both deserved what was coming to them tonight. They truly deserved it. Throughout all of this, her lover was constantly humiliating me. I watched everything unfold, and with each passing second, the pain intensified. I couldn't believe what was happening to me. I realized that my love for her had finally died. 45 minutes later, I was fed up. There was a break during the game, which meant it was time for the halftime show. I switched the system to live streaming mode and turned on the recording of Bob and Sharon's jerk performance from the very beginning. It wasn't long before the phone started ringing continuously. I ignored all the calls and took out my cell phone. I dialed Sharon's number and heard him calling through the monitors. She looked at him and noticed, "This is Rick." "Well, I'm not answering his call this time. Let's see how he likes it, and now let's continue our evening." She is naive. She had no idea what awaits her next. I ended the call and dialed again. "Well, I guess I should answer it," she said, reaching into her purse. "Hello, Rick," she answered. "What do you want now?" I could practically hear the venom in her voice. I asked, "Sharon, where are you? What are you doing?" "I went shopping since you didn't call earlier. I'm going to grab something to eat, then head home soon." "So you're shopping now?" I inquired. "Yes, and I'm planning to spend a lot of money," she replied. "Well, that's just wonderful. Thanks, Sharon, for being such a great wife. What more could a man ask for?" "Don't speak to me like that, you jerk. I don't know what's gotten into you. Goodbye." There she was, calling me a jerk again. "No, Sharon, the real jerk is Jerk Bob, right there in your motel room." When things went awry, they started flirting with each other again. Knowing she wouldn't answer the phone anymore, I dialed the motel number. "Kevin, this is Rick. Do you watch football on Monday night? No? That's how it should be. Could you call me in the jacuzzi?" After 2 rings, he picked up the phone. "Hi, asshole Bob. Can I talk to Sharon again?" "Rick, why are you calling here?" "What's the matter?" "What is it?" she asked, picking up the phone. "Well, Sharon, you see, what's the matter? I know that you cheated on me, and I know where you are now and what you're doing. I'm going to file for divorce and kick you out. I'm sure something very bad is going to happen to Jerk Bob, too." "What are you talking about, Rick? I can't understand you lately. What's gotten into you?" "Sharon, the truth has come out. I think you should turn on Monday Night Football and watch the halftime show. See you later. Goodbye." On the monitor in the room, I saw her go to the TV, turn it on, and set it to MNF. "Oh my God, no!" she screamed when she saw herself with her lover on live TV. Due to the delay in the broadcast, she witnessed what the whole of Atlanta had already seen. "Oh no, oh no, oh no," she repeated, hurriedly dressing and running out of the room. Her lover was also eager to leave, cursing under his breath. "He's finished. I'll find him," he muttered, unaware of the consequences of his words. As soon as they left the room, I turned off the monitors and allowed the video stream to end. Then I turned off the lane assist mode and returned the system to full automation mode. Taking the tape, I left the broadcast booth knowing that this might be my last visit to this building. Before leaving, I took a few personal items from my desk. You are aware of this. I spent the rest of the evening at Frankie's, where everyone was talking about my performance during the break. After the game was over, I hailed a taxi and went home. When I arrived home, I found Sharon sitting in the dimly lit living room. The phone lay abandoned, and it was evident she had been sobbing uncontrollably. Despite her tears, I remained indifferent. For me, it was all over. "How could you betray me like that, Rick?" she sobbed. "After all the years we've been together, how could you?" "No, Sharon," I retorted. "The real question is, how could you betray me? I'm drunk. I'm going to bed. We'll talk tomorrow." She stayed motionless as I exited the room, making my way down the hall to the spare bedroom. The next morning, nursing a considerable hangover, I found her still on the sofa, dark circles under her eyes. It seemed she hadn't slept at all, but once again I couldn't bring myself to care. She brought this upon herself. I had no part in it. I returned the phone to its place on the hook, and almost immediately it began to ring. For the next 90 minutes, I fielded calls from various people, family members like her parents, friends, church acquaintances, my former boss, or should I say ex-boss, and both of my daughters. They were deeply upset by what they had witnessed, and nothing I said could console them. I recognized that it was harsh for them to have witnessed such a thing, but they are adults and will eventually move past it. And, of course, there was a call from Mrs. Jerkbob. She inquired if I had a recording of the entire incident, to which I assured her I did, and offered to provide her with a copy if she desired. It was evident that everyone I spoke to had seen the Monday Night Football halftime show and wanted to express their thoughts on it. Some were furious with me, understandably so given its explicit content, while others, like her parents, viewed my actions as appalling for subjecting her to public scrutiny. However, most were sympathetic and understood my perspective. It was a taxing ordeal, but it was the consequence I had to face for my actions. Throughout it all, Sharon remained seated, crying silently. Eventually, I decided to disconnect the phone once more and went to brew myself some coffee. When I returned, I offered her some coffee and brought out the divorce papers along with the investment documents she needed to sign. "Sharon, I'm filing for divorce. After discovering and witnessing what happened last night, it's clear you've been unfaithful for at least a year or more, and I cannot continue this marriage. These papers outline a no-fault divorce, and I'm proposing an equal division of our assets. To proceed, I require your signature on the divorce agreement and the agreement to split our investments evenly, both immediately. There will be no negotiation or modification of these documents. They are fair to you. I'll give you until 5 p.m. today to consult with a lawyer and confirm the fairness of my offer. At 5:01 p.m., the offer expires, and I will pursue divorce on grounds of adultery, seeking a distribution of assets based on our respective contributions and earnings. In essence, I'll pursue everything I'm entitled to. This is by far the best offer available to you, so accept it. And ultimately, it would be unwise for you to challenge a divorce on the grounds of adultery when the entire Atlanta community finds out the truth. Everyone will know that you are lying and unfaithful. It seems that's exactly what you wanted to be. I overheard you saying that to your lover. Now your wish has been fulfilled and everyone knows it. Accept the offer, Sharon." "Rick, I still love you, and I want our marriage to continue. Can't we try to solve our problems?" "That may be true, Sharon, but it doesn't matter. Love has nothing to do with it. I refuse to remain your husband. Our marriage broke up when you put him above me, and whether you admit it or not, that decision was made when you entered into a relationship with him. and now I advise you to pull yourself together and consult with a lawyer. Time is running out." Later that day, she returned home with legal documents. "My lawyer advises me to endorse these documents, Rick. He believes you've presented a fair offer given the circumstances, and he suggests I seize the opportunity for this settlement. Rick, could we have a conversation? Would you be willing to hear me out and perhaps consider forgiving me, working together to salvage our marriage?" I assured her I'd listen attentively, as I genuinely wanted to understand her actions and whether this had occurred previously in our marriage. We sat down at the kitchen table together, and she started telling me everything. No one else was involved in this case. It all started shortly before she started working for Jerk Bob. She admitted that she couldn't pinpoint exactly why, because she was quite pleased with me, but she couldn't deny that she was attracted to Jerk Bob, probably because of his charismatic behavior. She believed that he loved her. Recognizing his charisma, I destroyed her illusion of love by replacing the 2 recordings I had with his participation. On that first day, Jerk Bob muttered, "This stupid woman better make sure that her husband doesn't get wind of our affair. As soon as I'm done with her, she'll leave. She's too naive, but it's time for her to disappear from the scene soon." The second audio recording came from the room just before she entered. "I'm going to spend the night with this woman. She won't suspect anything, but tomorrow I'm going to fire her and break off my relationship with her. If she causes trouble, I threaten to tell Rick about it. That should silence her. I can't risk her husband finding out and ruining everything for me. So, Sharon, not only did you ruin our marriage, but you also made a mistake about Bob's feelings for you. To him, you were nothing more than entertainment. You were just someone he could use and throw away. I witnessed all of this. But for me, you were first and foremost a wife, not a toy. No, Sharon, I could never save our marriage for 2 reasons. First of all, you broke our vows and I can't turn a blind eye to it. And secondly, even if we stayed together, you would never be happy with me. No matter how much we love each other, it won't be enough to overcome the damage you've caused." She remained seated, tears streaming down her face, acknowledging the truth in my words. Eventually, she simply signed both sets of documents. I assured her that I'd be moving out and offered for her to stay until she found a new place. Given her financial situation, I doubted she could afford to keep the house, and frankly, I had no desire to continue living there. So we agreed to sell the house and split the proceeds equally, just like our other assets. Besides, the house held too many memories for us. With the papers in my packed bags from the day before, I left the house. First, I dropped off the documents at my broker's office, then checked into a hotel for the night. The following morning, I met with my lawyer. We went over the divorce documents, and he agreed to submit them to the Superior Court of our county that very day. We also discussed the predicament I faced with the station and the FCC. He clarified that the FCC had the power to impose civil fines, revoke licenses, or reject renewal applications. Moreover, individuals found guilty in a federal district court could face criminal fines and/or up to 2 years of imprisonment. To be honest, I wasn't surprised, having been in the industry for 22 years and being well aware of the regulations. Considering the circumstances, my lawyer believed jail time was unlikely, but significant fines were inevitable, and my career would effectively be over. I'd need to seek employment in a different field. Within days, the repercussions hit me hard. The FCC served me, and I was set to spend several days in court defending myself. I won't delve into the case's intricacies, but suffice it to say, the fine equated to approximately a year's salary, wiping out my savings. To make matters worse, my broadcast license was revoked, barring me from working in my profession for 2 years. The positive aspect, however, is that TT had also watched MNF. Despite the fact that my actions were illegal and driven by vindictiveness, he showed me compassion and offered me a job with responsibilities tailored to meet the FCC-imposed restrictions on me. It seems his recent divorce, particularly the harsh treatment from his ex-wife, Henry's daughter and Peter's sister, had softened him. I suppose I did find one reason to appreciate HJ. Jerk Bob once confronted me at Frankie's. Initially, he seemed intent on striking me, but somehow I ended up pinning him down with one foot on his chest and tightly gripping one of his arms. "Now, Jerk Bob, I don't expect to ever hear from you again. Is that clear?" I stated. His response was a profanity. I figured another kick to the ribs was necessary. "Jerk Bob, I possess an audio recording of you threatening my life. I believe presenting this to the authorities would allow me to obtain a restraining order against you and potentially press assault charges. With the evidence I have, you might end up serving time in prison. Is that what you want?" I questioned. He shook his head in refusal. As I delivered one final kick for emphasis, I concluded, "Well then, I suppose this marks the end of our communication." He's no longer affiliated with the church, though he's still facing personal challenges. He lost his position and credentials due to misconduct. Last I heard, he found employment at a travel agency in the city. Despite his flaws, he had a magnetic personality, which likely helps him cope. He'll need resilience, as his wife successfully sued him for divorce, citing adultery, and obtained a substantial settlement. Despite some legal issues with evidence, it seems my testimony was impactful. I'm moving forward with my life. It's not without its challenges, but I'm discovering ways to find happiness. Although I had casual dates, I remained true to my values, choosing not to engage in premarital intimacy. I believe in waiting for the right partner and honoring the sanctity of marriage. When I meet the right person, we'll share intimacy within the bonds of marriage. I'm patient and determined to find my ideal match. I do occasionally run into Sharon. We both attended Stephanie's college graduation and Melanie's baby's baptism. I maintained a polite demeanor, but I made it clear that my presence was not for her benefit. I had no interest in rekindling any form of friendship or camaraderie. It was evident to me that she was unhappy. I could see her emotional distress stemming from our breakup and her regret for her actions. However, her emotional state wasn't the main issue. The core problem was her betrayal of our marriage, allowing herself to engage with another man. That fact remained unchanged. Perhaps if I were different, I could have forgiven her, but my values are firm, leaving little room for compromise. She'll spend the rest of her days aware that what she sacrificed for her encounter with Jerk Bob was me, along with the entirety of her life with me. I was just a man who cherished her deeply, yet she discarded it all. Indeed, she relinquished me. Regrettably, she also forfeited any semblance of respectability, as everyone who witnessed her infamous performance during the Monday Night Football halftime show now regards her as promiscuous. Word has it that she receives numerous invitations for dates. To her credit, she hasn't accepted any. It must be agonizing to realize that most of the men reaching out only seek to objectify her. Not a fulfilling way to live, but I'm not the one who did this to her. She brought it upon herself.